Prince Harry's highly anticipated 60 Minutes interview with Anderson Cooper began with a quiet sense of formality and warmth. But what unfolded quickly transformed into one of the most tense and unforgettable clashes ever captured on television. The set was stripped back to its essence: 2 chairs, a coffee table, and the unmistakable stillness of serious journalism. Anderson opened with a polite smile, thanking Harry for being there, and Harry responded with a stiff nod, his voice already edged with defiance as he admitted, "Well, I suppose the world expects me to explain myself. So here I am." The conversation started gently enough, with Anderson asking about Harry's new life in America, his ventures outside royal duties, and raising a family in privacy. But even in these opening exchanges, Harry's tone was sharper than expected. He dismissed the crown as outdated, calling America a relief from the suffocating traditions of royalty, adding with a smirk that at least here he wasn't treated as a spare part. Anderson, seasoned in interviewing leaders and celebrities under fire, pushed back carefully, asking if perhaps tradition also offered stability and continuity. Harry leaned forward, his eyes flashing. Stability for whom? For those sitting on golden thrones? Tradition is just a cage with nicer wallpaper. My family clings to it because it hides the cracks. The room thickened with tension, but Anderson kept his tone calm as he reminded Harry that millions still admire the monarchy as a symbol of unity and resilience. Harry's answer came swiftly and coldly. They're infatuated with a fairy tale. They don't see the machinery behind it. The manipulation, the silencing, the control. They celebrate the crown, but ignore who bleeds for it. Cameras captured every flicker of irritation across Harry's face as the interview shifted from curiosity to confrontation. Anderson steered toward family, asking softly about life as a husband and father, and Harry's smile tightened as he answered, "Life as a husband and father is exactly as it should be. Mine. And frankly, neither the press nor the monarchy has any right to dissect it. I protect what's mine, which is more than they ever did for me." Anderson didn't let it pass without challenge, noting that Harry himself often shares intimate details publicly in interviews, documentaries, and his book, and asked if there wasn't a contradiction between demanding privacy while also controlling the narrative. Harry bristled, his irritation clear. "That's a tired argument. Privacy doesn't mean silence, it means control. I decide what the world deserves to know, not the other way around. If people can't grasp that, they're not worth addressing." The warmth that once framed the interview had evaporated, leaving an icy tension that filled every pause. Crew members barely breathed as Anderson pressed further, remarking that some might say Harry's approach was selective. Harry shot back instantly, his arms folded across his chest. "Selective? No, it's called freedom, something you, as an American, should understand better than most." The remark hung in the air like a challenge, Anderson's steady composure a sharp contrast to Harry's visible frustration. Then Anderson leaned in with the question that cut deeper than any before. "Your mother, Princess Diana, became a global symbol, not only because of her role, but because of the way she connected with people. Do you feel that you carry her legacy?" For a brief moment, Harry's mask slipped. His lips pressed into a hard line before his words came out clipped and heavy with emotion. "Legacy is a word the media clings to. You put my mother on pedestals, then tore her down, and now you expect me to carry that weight as though it's a crown I should be grateful for. I am not my mother's replacement, and I will not let anyone use her name to measure me." Anderson nodded slowly, absorbing the intensity of the answer, before suggesting gently that many still see Harry as continuing Diana's spirit, her independence, her challenge to tradition. Harry's jaw tightened again, his patience clearly fraying as the cameras rolled. What began as an intimate exchange had turned into a duel of words, with Anderson's steady, probing calm colliding against Harry's defiance. The stillness in the studio was deceptive, charged with the energy of a man feeling cornered and a journalist unwilling to back down. It was no longer just an interview. It was a powder keg waiting to ignite, and Prince Harry was holding the match, edging closer to the explosive walkout that would leave the world stunned. Prince Harry's much-anticipated 60 Minutes interview with Anderson Cooper, meant to be calm and insightful, quickly unraveled into something far more volatile. The room was quiet, stripped to essentials: 2 chairs, a table, and the hushed gravity of serious television. Anderson opened warmly, but Harry's responses carried an edge that hinted at the storm to come. When Anderson asked about carrying his mother's legacy, Harry scoffed, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed. You all want to turn me into a symbol because it makes for better headlines. I'm not here to be a candle in the wind for anyone's nostalgia. My mother's memory belongs to me and my family, not the public. And certainly not journalists trying to spin a story. His words were sharp, almost accusatory, but Anderson remained steady, absorbing the blow with decades of practiced composure. Gently, he pivoted. Let's talk about Megan. Some critics argue your marriage pulled you further from your family. How do you respond? Harry's eyes flashed. Critics? You mean the same people who have never met her? Megan didn't pull me away. She saved me from a suffocating institution. She freed me. Anyone who can't see that is blind. Anderson's voice stayed calm. But when you describe her as saving you, doesn't that imply that without her, you'd still be trapped? Doesn't that give her a singular influence over your choices? Harry smirked. It's called partnership, something most journalists like you can't understand because you're too busy dissecting other people's relationships instead of living your own. The sting was deliberate. But Anderson didn't bite, only scribbling notes before moving forward. You've been open about raising your children in America. How is fatherhood different here than it might have been in the UK? Harry exhaled sharply. It's simple. Here my children get to be normal. They're not props for photographers or pawns in a royal chess game. Back home, they would have been sacrifices on the altar of tradition. That's not family, that's exploitation. Anderson tilted his head. So you don't believe your family would have protected them? Harry's laugh was bitter. The monarchy doesn't even protect its heirs, let alone the so-called spares children. The words landed heavy, but Anderson pressed on. Some might argue that by stepping into documentaries, books, and interviews like this, you're still putting them in the spotlight, just under your terms. How do you reconcile that? Harry leaned forward, voice hardening. I don't need to reconcile anything. I decide what's best for my family. The media doesn't. The Crown doesn't. Certainly not people like you. The air chilled instantly. Anderson's jaw flexed, but his tone stayed measured. It seems every question about accountability, Harry, you redirect back to control. Do you think there's room for balance? Harry's smirk widened. Balance is a myth. Either you control your story, or it controls you. I refuse to be a victim of narrative anymore. That's something you'll never understand because your career depends on poking at other people's lives. For the first time, Anderson's brow furrowed, irritation flickering across his usually calm face. He let silence stretch, watching Harry lean into it with smug satisfaction. Then he asked, What do you see for yourself in the future? 10 years from now, what does life look like? Harry chuckled under his breath, the sound cold. The future is mine, not a press release. I'll do what I want when I want, and people can either accept that or choke on their expectations. Anderson tapped his pen slowly, then looked directly at Harry. You know, I've interviewed presidents under scandal, soldiers returning from war, families broken by tragedy. They all shared one thing, humility. Do you think there's a risk that yours has been lost? The smugness drained from Harry's face, replaced with a scowl. Humility? Don't lecture me. I've survived things you couldn't imagine. If I seem unapologetic, it's because I've earned the right. Humility is for those still begging for approval. I don't need anyone's. His voice rang through the silent studio like a hammer. The atmosphere shifted from heavy to suffocating. Anderson gave a slow nod, his voice calm but edged with steel. That's one way of seeing it. Cameras rolled on, crew frozen in place, the air thick with unease. What began as an interview had become a standoff, two men locked in a battle of composure and defiance, and everyone in the room felt the collision inching closer to a breaking point that could no longer be stopped. Anderson Cooper shifted slightly in his chair, pen resting idle against the notepad, his tone steady, though a hint of weariness crept in. Harry, you've spoken often about control and carving your own path. But critics say your book, your Netflix series, even interviews like this still circle back to the monarchy. How do you respond to people who say you're trying to escape while never letting go? Harry gave a sharp, bitter laugh. Critics, always critics. They cling to illusions, desperate to keep the crown polished. Let me be clear. I talk about it because it shaped me, because it scarred me. The monarchy isn't something you walk away from. It's stamped into your skin. If I expose its flaws, that's my right. If people can't handle the truth, that's their problem. Anderson raised an eyebrow, calm but unyielding. But you've also profited from those flaws. Isn't that a contradiction? Harry leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Profited? Tell me, Is it profit when you claw back pieces of your life that were stolen, or survival? I reclaimed my story, and if people pay to hear it, so be it. Better they hear it from me than from tabloids you love to quote. The dismissive tone carried venom. Anderson's voice stayed level but tighter. I don't quote tabloids. I ask questions the public wants answered. There's a difference. Harry smirked. Semantics. At the end of the day, you're still digging, still feeding the appetite for drama. You're no different than the rest. The insult hung heavy, and Anderson didn't smile it away this time. His voice remained calm but sharper. You've condemned the press, yet here you are again, cameras rolling. Is it fair to say you want the attention? Just on your terms? Harry's lips curled into a mocking smile. Ah, the trap question. Attention, fame, celebrity. Do you people ever tire of recycling it? I'm not here because I want your attention. I'm here because you begged for mine. Let's not pretend otherwise. The arrogance sent a ripple through the room. Even the hum of the lights felt louder. Anderson stayed still, composure intact but fraying at the edges. All right, he said softly. You've often spoken of your mother. She fought for independence against the same institution you criticize. Do you think she'd be proud of how you've handled things? Harry's jaw clenched, his eyes burning with pain and anger. Don't you dare use my mother as a prop in your broadcast. You never knew her. You never knew what she endured, and you have no right to speculate about what she'd think. Anderson let the words hang, expression unchanged, though his patience thinned. I wasn't speculating, Harry. I was asking your perspective. There's a difference. Harry leaned back, voice rising, dripping with disdain. Perspective? My perspective doesn't need your validation. If you think I'll hand you a sentimental soundbite, you're wasting your time. Anderson exhaled slowly, steadying himself. Very well. Let's talk about Meghan. Many admire her, others criticize her. How has her role shaped the man you are today? Harry laughed coldly. Here we go. Always Meghan, always the obsession. Let me spell it out. Meghan isn't my role model. She's my partner. If people can't accept that, maybe they're stuck in the past. Why don't you ask about my projects instead of parroting what the world speculates? Anderson's smile was thin, professionalism strained. I have asked about your work. You've steered every answer back to grievances with your family or the press. Is it possible your critics have a point? That your story has become defined by resentment rather than purpose? Harry's expression hardened, his voice dropping to a growl. Critics. Always critics. I don't owe anyone purpose. I don't owe you a tidy narrative. I live for myself, not for approval. The arrogance suffocated the room, but Anderson pressed on, leaning forward, voice calm, but edged with steel. And yet here you sit, on one of the most watched programs in America, demanding to be heard. That, Harry, is a contradiction worth noting. Harry's reply came sharp, venomous. Spare me the lecture, Anderson. You thrive on contradictions. The silence after was thick, oppressive, the cameras catching every flicker of defiance. What had begun as an interview was now a duel, each word landing heavier than the last. The air in the studio pulsing with the sense that civility was about to shatter. Anderson Cooper sat upright, pen motionless on his notepad, his eyes locked on Prince Harry across the studio. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the kind of silence that seems alive. For nearly an hour, the conversation had seesawed between probing questions and defensive answers. Anderson's voice remained steady, but there was a sharp edge now, a steel beneath the calm. Harry, let's step back. We've talked about your family, your choices, your life in America. You've said much about control, about refusing to be defined. But I have to ask, don't you think this defensiveness, this hostility is defining you more than anything your family or the press ever could? Harry smirked, tilting his head like a man sure of his victory. Defensiveness? Hostility? I call it honesty, something your industry is allergic to. The problem isn't me, Anderson. It's people like you who want me trapped in a fairy tale. Newsflash, I don't fit in the box and I never will. Anderson leaned forward, pen tapping once. This isn't about fairy tales. It's about accountability. Every time I ask about your family, you lash out. When I ask about your wife, you scoff. When I ask about your future, you dismiss it. At what point do you stop blaming everyone else and look in the mirror? Harry's jaw tightened. You sit there in judgment as if you know what it's like to be hounded every second of your life. You don't, none of you do. And yet you expect me to bow my head and answer politely, no, that's over. I play by no one's rules but my own. The air thickened. Crew members shifted uneasily, sensing the breaking point. Anderson set his pen down deliberately, his voice low but cutting. I've interviewed presidents under fire, war veterans who lost everything, survivors who rebuilt themselves. Do you know what they all had in common? Humility, gratitude, responsibility. What I see here isn't courage, it's arrogance. You call it honesty. I call it entitlement. Harry blinked, caught off guard, but recovered with a scoff. Entitlement? From you? You don't get to define me or lecture me about humility. I've lived a life you couldn't survive a day in. Anderson shook his head. No, Harry. You've been given a life most people couldn't imagine. And instead of owning that with grace, you sneer at every question and treat every opportunity as an insult. That's not survival. That's self-destruction. The words landed like a strike. Harry leaned forward, voice sharp, defensive. You think you can shame me? I don't owe anyone explanations, least of all you. Then why are you here? Anderson pressed, his tone unflinching. Why sit in this chair under these cameras if not to explain yourself? You rail against the media, yet run to the spotlight. You talk about freedom, yet you're shackled to your bitterness. You want to be heard, Harry, but you don't want to listen. That's why you're here alone, without the institution, without the family, without the respect you claim you deserve. Harry's fists tightened on the arms of his chair. You think you know me? You don't. My family didn't deserve me. The monarchy didn't deserve me. Maybe the world doesn't either. But I'll still live my truth whether you like it or not. Anderson leaned back, his calm finally hardening into coldness. You want the truth? You're not living it. You're hiding behind it. You're not the brave rebel you think you are. You're a man who had everything and chose to burn it down. Not out of purpose, but pride. And if Diana were here, I think she'd weep at what you've become. The words sliced through the room like glass. For a split second, Harry's arrogance faltered, replaced by raw fury. He shoved his chair back, the screech echoing across the studio. That's it. I won't sit here and be insulted. This interview is over. Gasps rippled through the crew as he ripped the microphone away, storming toward the exit, wires snapping loose in his wake. Anderson didn't move. His eyes followed Harry briefly before turning back to the cameras. His voice was steady, almost reflective. Sometimes the hardest truth to hear is the one that cuts closest to the bone. Tonight, you saw a man unwilling to face his reflection. That is his choice. But our job is to ask, to listen, even when the answers come wrapped in arrogance. He paused, exhaling slowly. To our viewers, I apologize. We hope for honesty and reflection. What we got was something else. Yet perhaps in its own way, it revealed more than any prepared answer ever could. The cameras lingered on Anderson's composed face before fading to black. Across America, living rooms buzzed with stunned silence. The prince had come to tell his story but had walked away instead, leaving not clarity, but controversy.